Hello, welcome back. This morning I had just a brief discussion video, and hopefully you got a chance to watch that. But in that, I promised you I would do a second video today, and that's just what we're going to do. And this one will be primarily forging. The other day we made a little railroad spike out of a piece of coil spring. So that was just one little challenge, was to make a railroad spike. But we're going to take that a little further. People like to make knives out of railroad spikes, and while I am not primarily a knife maker, I, like so many other new blacksmiths years ago, thought I was going to make fame and fortune making knives, so I've made a lot of knives, and that's why I am not a knife maker today, because I found out that it isn't really a good way to make money unless you are spectacular, and I am not a spectacular knife maker. But we can make a simple little knife just fine, and that's what we're going to do with our little railroad spike. And so here's our little railroad spike we made the other day. Overall, it's just shy of 4 inches, a little over 3 3/4. So it's not going to be a very big knife, and you got to have some amount for a handle. Typically, this whole thing is about what would be the minimum I would say a good handle would be. But that's just not going to work out very well if we're going to actually get any kind of a knife. So I'm going to use about half of this for a handle and about half of this for a knife blade. The half for the blade is going to stretch out quite a bit, because this is still about 3/8 of an inch square, and we'll get quite a bit of blade out of that. Probably go for about 3/4 wide and about maybe 3 or 4 inches long for the blade. So let's put this in the forge and let's get started. Now, unfortunately, the blower on my coal forge gave up today. The electric motor on my nice antique Buffalo blower decided it's only going to run at about 1/4 speed. So I'm going to have to take that to a motor shop. So until I get that fixed, we're going to be working in the gas forge. And once again, I'll try to shut this off between heats so you can hear what I have to say, and it's not as annoying to listen to the roar of the forge. Typically, I would just let the gas forge run. I'm not advocating turning the forge off between heats. I don't think that does you any good for the most part. But for the sake of the video, I think it's a little bit more tolerable for the sound. So we're going to get that hot. I want to create a nice transition from the handle section to the blade. So I'm going to try and keep my hammer edge lined up with the anvil edge, so I can create that nice little shoulder, and hopefully I'll end up with something even on both sides. This will take a few heats. So same thing. And I'm going to want this blade a little wider, so I'm going to use the cross peen just a little bit here. I also want it all to one side, so I'm going to offset it. I'll keep working back and forth until I get a blade shape I like. It's still fairly thick. Blade's a little bit off to one side, so we can kind of straighten that. But we need to get it hot again. I think we can also make this blade just a hair longer than it is. It's still awfully thick for this small a blade. You want to work both sides of the blade to keep stresses even, or you stand a certain risk. Railroad spikes can be hard to hold on to. You stand a certain risk of warpage if you don't work both sides of the blade. So you want to keep turning it back and forth, particularly when we get to doing the bevels. We're really kind of just on to evening up the blade profile at this point. Don't let it roll over and create a cold shut. It'll make you really unhappy later. You can notice this still tips this way a little bit. I'm okay with that because that'll kind of self-correct here in a little bit. So this is going to be a small knife, but it's actually going to be a very useful little knife. We're not doing any serious forging at this heat. I'm just trying to keep things straight, get any twists out of it. And then it's going to be time to start working on the bevel. As we forge our bevels, it's real easy to hit the anvil instead of the work. So if we put it up on this block, we can overlap that. This block is also a little cleaner than my anvil surface, so it's going to create a little bit better step. But as we do this, we are stretching this edge. And by stretching the edge, it's going to force the blade to curve this way and straighten out some of that curve we left in it. Work both sides. And this doesn't come to a point. That'll be easier to file or grind in later. So that's actually pretty close to what I want. I'm going to make sure it's not twisted. But speaking of twists, I think I will put a twist in the handle just to make it look better. Now this will want to quit or twist quite easily right up in here. So I'm letting that sit. Good time to straighten it out. I'm going to go ahead and use the torch to heat this up just where I want to twist it. It's still pretty hot from the forge, but I want to leave the area up there by the blade cool so I don't just twist the blade and you could actually shear it right off. You could do this twisting before you forge the blade, but there's a certain risk of damaging the twist. So it's just a matter of what your comfort level is for which way you'd rather do this. And I'm only going to go a half a twist. I'm going to try and straighten that out. And we're going to do it again. So this will be a reverse twist, but it only reversed directions 2 times. Boy, is that deforming. That certainly isn't what I wanted, but we can fix it. We'll put that back in the fire, and we can straighten that. So this is proof things don't always go just the way you thought they were going to go. Got a little bit of a flat there that I can still clamp in the vise without hurting my twist. And we can straighten that out pretty darn well. Let's see what we got. That's pretty good. So the last thing I want to do is just straighten the blade out again. We got a little bit off center doing the twist. I'm not working the twisted area here, I'm just making a little transition. Make it a little more graceful, right from the edge of the twist there. You want to get it straight now, not later. Although there are ways to straighten these later. So here's our little knife. I went ahead and put my touch mark on it, and then I did the normalizing step 3 times. Let it cool so I could hold on to it each time. And now it's time to give that a profile. Like everything else, you've got choices. If you have a belt grinder, which is what most professional knife makers prefer, I would absolutely use it. But I wouldn't go out and buy a belt grinder if you're just making a few knives, or even if you're brand new to knife making. Learning to hand file will really open your eyes and let you see more detail, and in the long run I think you'll be a better knife maker for it. So we're going to go ahead and hand file this. This is a small knife, it's not going to take long. First thing I want to do is kind of flatten up the back and use a good big coarse file. You want to actually push and lift. Now, a lot of times I leave it in contact, but I'm not filing on the backstroke. So we got a nice smooth back now. Still got a little bit of a high spot I think I'd like to take out. Now if you fully anneal this instead of just normalizing, it will be a little softer and a little easier to file. I'm pretty happy with that. Now I'm going to use a finer file, and I'm going to draw file this lengthwise. Leaves a finer finish, gets rid of the scratch marks. Now it's time to shape the blade shape. This is where we're going to want to bring that right to a point. So I'm going to straighten this out a little bit, bring that to a point. Just depends on the blade you want to make. So we're going to do something about like that. Apologize for the squeakiness. Thin blades tend to squeak and it's hard to clamp the thin spot up. And then back to the draw filing with the finer file. Last thing you want are scratches in the cutting edge. That might lead to cracks in the hardening process. Be a little bit pointier. So that's pretty good. Next thing I want to do is, I think it's a little sharp right here. Well, I want to just take a round file. I tell you, these things can be hard to hold on to. I'm going to use the round file and just make that a little more pleasant. And there again, we can go to a finer file to finish that up. I think you've got a little bit rounded. That's a little bit more comfortable. That's not going to be a bad little knife there. It's going to be usable. Next thing we need to do is establish our bevels. For that, I like a piece of angle iron and a pair of vice grips. We're going to need to clamp this at the very edge here. Let me turn this around. Put the edge of the blade over the corner of the angle iron. This isn't going to be real easy because it is such a small blade, but it's completely doable. And if you're doing a flat blade that's got a flat tang, this would be easier because you can clamp the tang up. You don't want to take this down to sharp at this point. Just establish the bevels. And there again, draw filing will help take out some of those file marks. Do the other end, or the other side. Try and keep that in the camera's view here. Try and keep your angle the same on both sides. And that is pretty much all we're going to do for now. Next thing is to harden that, temper it, and then it will polish it up a little bit. We'll be back to the files. Now I have this forge turned down about as low as I can possibly run it to harden this. I don't want to get it too hot. And I'm going to start by heating the handle end because it's going to take longer to heat that part of the blade. We're starting to get a little color in there. You may not be able to see it on the camera. Check for magnetic. It's still magnetic. And now's a good time to turn that around and you just get the blade part hot. And only about 1/3 of the cutting edge needs to be up to temperature. It's actually better if you don't harden the back of it. Make sure to heat it evenly. It's real easy to get the point too hot. Hot enough, and I'm only going to dip the edge to start with. I'm going to keep it moving as much as I can. Just kind of difficult with such a small piece, or such a small can. This is my usual heat treat oil. Olive oil would work. And if you did this with a W1 steel, you could do this in water. Okay, that blade area is cool now. So we put this in the toaster oven for an hour to temper it, and now it's going to be time to clean it up and sharpen it. It's the same procedure, but I don't want to take a chance on scratching the finish at this point because I want to leave that black finish and I don't want to scar. So it's a little weird trying to clamp this up so you can file it. And I know my hand's in the way, sorry about that. So I've got a little leather pad that I'm putting on here. Now I'm just going to go to the fine file and just clean this up. It should file. It should file a lot harder than it did the first time. But a knife should not be so hard that you can't file it a little bit. And a good, fresh, sharp file really helps. Now I'm not going to waste your time showing you both sides of this, but I will show you a little trick on hand sanding. Wrapping the sandpaper around a stick helps keep you follow the bevels. And I'd start with about 120 after filing and go as fine as you want to. The finer you go, the better the polish will be. But I'd at least go 220. 400 would probably be better. That was 150 grit that I was using there. But you can see that's starting to look like a pretty nice little knife. And it's not quite sharp. Sharpening will be another step. But I don't think I'll show you sharpening. It's getting late in the day and getting dark, and I'm losing my light through the skylights to be able to shoot video with. After hand sanding, a little bit of Scotch-Brite gives a nice matte finish and helps even it out a little bit. But you can spend hours hand sanding and hand finishing a knife. It's just up to how much time you want to put into it and how nice a finish you want. So here's our completed knife. It still needs some work with a whetstone, diamond stone, whatever you prefer to sharpen it. But other than that, it is finished. It started off as just a nice little mini railroad spike we made out of coil spring. And now it's a little mini railroad spike knife. And it's probably better steel than a normal railroad spike. We ended up with about a 3-inch blade. It's got a nice distal taper. It's thicker back here and tapers towards the point, which is a nicer knife to use. And I have sanded lightly the flat or the corners on the twist just to make it a little bit more comfortable. So that's a fairly simple little project. It's actually 2 projects in one, and it's part of the Blacksmiths Challenge. If you haven't seen that, go back and watch that video. And you don't have to do things like this as part of that Blacksmiths Challenge. That's just a fun little thing to get you thinking of different things within that limitation of the 1/2 by 1/2 by 3-inch long piece of steel. But this is a useful item. Make a sheath for it. I don't think the sheath has to be part of the Blacksmiths Challenge. You can carry that, you can use it, you can open your mail with it, use it for a little bit of whittling, whatever you might normally use a knife for. So, have fun, use your imagination, try something that's just a little bit out of the box. I'm not going to do a lot of knives on this channel because I'm not a serious knife maker. But I'll bet this isn't the only knife we'll ever do. We'll probably do something a little bit more serious at some point. But we'll get back to more basic projects next time. In the meantime, I'd love it if you'd give a thumbs up to the video, hit that subscribe button down below, share this with your friends if you'd like to, get out to the shop, make something, and wear your safety glasses. See you later.